Hello and welcome to another computer hacking Cold War paranoid episode of the wonderful universe of This Ain't No Game, the weekly series where movies and video games fight it out for global thermonuclear supremacy. I'm Ryan Davis, and this week's movie is the 1983 techno-thriller classic, WarGames. Now, this is a movie that I've had a personal fondness for about as long as I can remember going to the movies. Not to get too indulgently autobiographical here, but my earliest movie-going memory was a drive-in double feature of WarGames and Tron. I consider it a significant formative experience, though I'm pretty sure I fell asleep during Tron. It had been a few years since I last saw WarGames, but I have to say I was honestly unsurprised by how well it still holds up as a movie. It helps that the whole game element isn't there arbitrarily for its own sake, instead serving as both a significant plot device and an important bit of thematic juxtaposition. Now, my $5 film nerd vocabulary aside, WarGames is just a fun, clever movie that entertains while serving as an oddly specific time capsule for the era in which it was made. Because if there were two afflictions that defined the cultural landscape in America in the early 80s, they were Pac-Man fever and the Cold War chills.
Get me the president on my horn.
After an apocalyptically tense opening scene in a nuclear missile silo with a pre-Reservoir Dogs, seemingly prenatal Michael Madsen.
Turn your key, sir.
And that guy from The West Wing who played Womack in The Rock, you know, the guy I'm talking about?
Right.
We meet teenage hacker David Lightman, which is a breakout role for a young Matthew Broderick. Now, Broderick really made his name a few years later with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but there are shades of that character in Lightman, who doesn't fall into that creepy, socially awkward loner nerd archetype of your usual movie hacker.
Remember you told me to tell you when you were acting rudely and insensitively? Remember that? You're doing it right now.
Sure, he's handy with an 8-inch floppy and a 300-baud acoustic coupler, but the movie makes a point early on to show that he's just as adept at social engineering in a scene that also serves as a great example of WarGames' playful sense of humor.
All right, Lightman. Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Get out, Lightman.
Now, Lightman's also a bit of a show-off, and after getting deliberately sent to the principal's office in order to steal a password that will let him alter his grades, he lets classmate Ali Sheedy in on his sneaky little enterprise. Though she kind of takes a backseat as the machinations of the greater story kick in, there's a nice, low-key, kind of flirty energy between Sheedy and Broderick, and it really helps sell both the characters as real, kind of awkward teenagers, which amplifies the danger when their curiosity ends up getting them into some serious-ass trouble.
Where should we go?
Anywhere?
Anywhere.
New York?
New York? Okay.
No, Paris. Paris. Yeah.
Will you be traveling alone?
Yeah. No, you want to go with me?
That trouble comes when Lightman, in an attempt to hack into a video game software company's computers in order to gain early access to their big holiday releases, stumbles onto a military defense computer called the Whopper that's controlled by an artificial intelligence called Joshua.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
Thinking the games he's playing are nothing more than that, Lightman begins a tactical nuclear simulation that looks completely real to the military staff at NORAD, leading a cigar-chomping General Barry Corbin and Dabney Coleman, who puts on a clinic for his specific brand of ingratiating menace as the defense technology specialist to bring Lightman in under suspicion of being a Russian spy.
No charge has been filed yet, but I think we are going to need a little time to sort things out here.
As if Lightman's life isn't spinning out of control enough, Joshua continues to play out that friendly little game of global thermonuclear warfare that he initiated and won't stop playing until it's all over. Now, this has extremely desperate implications as the team at NORAD, unable to discern between real data and Joshua's simulation, continue to prep for World War III.
We are at DEFCON 1.
DEFCON 1?
This same characteristic is what makes Joshua such a great, sinister presence in the film. And because it literally cannot discern between a simulation and the real thing, it's willing to go to some pretty terrifying ends to keep the game going. This leaves the fate of the world up to Lightman, who ends up breaking out of NORAD and seeking out the help of the reclusive genius that created Joshua to end the game. Now, it's easy to look back and kind of scoff at all the seemingly overblown Cold War paranoia that WarGames taps into so effectively, but there really was something plausible about the whole scenario at the time, and that's a big part of why WarGames still plays. Though some of the technology on display here was fudged for dramatic purposes, most notably the sophistication of Joshua and his trademark synthesized voice, it doesn't seem like a lazy screenwriting crutch. If nothing else, this film wrings more genuine dramatic tension out of people staring at computer screens than any other movie this side of Sneakers. Another techno thriller that, uncoincidentally, was written by the same screenwriting team behind WarGames.
Hello. You want to hear it talk?
Yeah. How can I talk?
It's not a real voice. This box just interprets signals from the computer and turns them into sound.
And that's going to do it for this week's edition of the wonderful universe of This Ain't No Game. Be sure to tune back in next week when we'll save the local arcade the only way we know how, with comically large joysticks and boobs.
I am laying down the law about that arcade, young lady.
Oh, Daddy, that reminds me. Connie and I were going to go shopping at the Bonorama. Could I have some Billies then?
Pardon?
You know, I think you called it lettuce once, or was it cabbage?
All right.
At least I didn't take them. Thank God.
All right, now, Patsy, we have an understanding. You will not go to the arcade again, right?
Daddy, if I want to go to the arcade, I am going to go.